Welcome everyone to the Indian Express analysis of 7th October 2022. I will explain this newspaper in three steps. First is why is the news, second is what is the news, and third is what can be the future prospects of the news. So let's get started with the first news, which is on budget review eve. Macro worries are back amid global recession fears, which means big worries, macroeconomic worries are back, and global recession is going to occur. So, what was the discussion about? So, discussion was done by PMO and Ministry of Finance, Prime Minister Office and Ministry of Finance, that seemed to suggest that cascading impact of a worse than anticipated global turndown may dent the budget arithmetic in the current second half of the current financial year. So, what does this mean? It means that the global turndown, which means global recession, as you know, the global economy is going down since pandemic and because of Russia and Ukraine war also, plus disruptions in supply chain, China Taiwan conflict. All of these have an impact that can dent, that can make the budget arithmetic in the second half of the current financial year a major disbalance. So far, the political leadership has been somewhat sanguine, which means there was an optimism. Why exactly there was an optimism? Because we have seen GDP growth, uptick in the GDP growth, plus there were steady tax revenues, which means good tax revenues were coming. For example, GST collections. GST collections were average 1.48 lakh crore. So that is why the political leadership was somewhat optimistic. But now issues are more greater, and what exactly is worrying the policymakers is the policymakers are pointing to multiple headwinds. So, what are these headwinds? What is exactly that is worrying the policymakers is a pressure on twin deficits: fiscal deficit, current account deficit. These both have enormous pressure on themselves. They can increase, and if deficit increases for a country, it means the economy is in not a good condition. Now, second is concern over private investment and job creation. So, what is this concern? Because private investment is not coming. We have seen Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman advertising for the industry to do private investment in India. But although all the efforts, there were less private investment. Plus, there are no enough job creation, which means population is increasing, labor force is increasing, but not adequate and sufficient jobs are there. And continuing distress in the MSME sector. So this sector is also facing a lot of stress, which is micro, small and medium enterprises. Their growth is coming to a halt, which means their growth is not growing as expected. Now, the additional spending on the account of inflated subsidies bill, government pay subsidies, for example, to LPGs, fertilizer subsidies, plus crop subsidies, which is called MSP. So, there are a lot of subsidies that are given, and if this subsidy increases, then there will be additional fiscal burden. Also, if free food grain scheme, which is public distribution system, if although government has increased it for more 3 months, but if it increases for more months, then this can add to the fiscal burden, which may necessitate reducing government expenditure. So what will government do? Government will reduce expenditure because there will be no money to expend. So that is why it will have to reduce the expenditure. Also, receipts should increase, which means tax coming from both sides. The direct tax and indirect tax both must have to increase. If these taxes do not increase, then we will need to cut expenditure. This is very simple economy. If the income is less or the income is going down, then you have to reduce the expenditure. Same for the country. If the tax are going to be less, then country have to cut expenditure. Now the spillover effects of continuing aggressive monetary tightening in the United States. So you know, Federal Reserve, it has aggressively increased its interest rate, and this has an effect on India's currency. Rupee has fallen to nearly 81 to a dollar, which means $1 is currently now 81 point something. So this has an effect. Also, Chinese slow down due to a hard COVID-19 policy. What was their policy? It was zero COVID policy, complete shutdown. So that is why China is also growing at a very slow pace. And unpredictability of crude oil prices given a volatile geopolitical scenario. It is about Russia and Ukraine because a lot of crude comes from there. Also Iran. So sanctions on Iran and Venezuela by the US. So this is also making the oil prices unpredictable, have only complicated the management of external sector. The central bank's intervention in the currency market to prevent the rupee from depreciating more sharply against the US dollar has already resulted in sharp dip in the country's forex reserve. So what does this mean? It means that Federal Reserve has increased their interest rate. So that is why rupee comes down. This always occurs. So when rupee comes down, what do India do? India also uses its forex reserve. So when it uses its forex reserve in order to balance the rupee, then these forex reserves comes down. And you know, a lot of forex reserve is needed for imports. So on the growth front, one major concern is that private investment is not showing meaningful signs of revival. I already told you that Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had brought the industry to step up investment, but it has been not a major success. You can call the government's bet on crowding in private investment has not yielded much success. So there was no, in fact, you can call less crowding of private investment. Despite there was no success despite multiple interventions on the policy side. So a lot of policy amendments were done. But instead of that, in spite of that, these private investments have not yielded much success. So what can we expect in the future? So economy is going to be less than I think 7% growth. So because of our own factors, internal factors plus external factors, also geopolitics, economy will not grow at a rate that we have had think of in the start of this year. So now next news is regarding China's Xinjiang. So there, why is this news has come? Because since I think 5 years, Uyghur Muslims of China's Xinjiang province have faced major human rights violations. They are kept in re-education camps in the name of, in fact, re-education camps, and there a lot of violation of human rights have come to the news. So what did UN did? So UN Human Rights Council holded a debate that whether China is violating the human rights in Xinjiang region or not. So this was the result. A lot of countries voted for it, a lot of countries abstained, and a lot of countries were against this. So human rights groups have been sounding the alarm over what is happening in the resource rich northwestern Chinese province for years. And what is their allegation? Their allegation is that more than 1 million Uyghur Muslims had been detained against their will. So they have been kept in the camps against their will in a large network of what Beijing calls re-education camps. And this is particularly for Uyghur Muslims. So now resolution was presented by a core group. So this resolution was presented by Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, UK and USA, and also co-sponsored by a range of states including Turkey. So what occurred there? While the Council's failure to adopt the proposal is an abdication of responsibility and a betrayal of Uyghur Muslims. So there was a failure. Why exactly? Because votes were not sufficient in the favor of this resolution. And who were the ones that have posed against that have voted against this resolution? Mostly these are Muslim countries. For example, Qatar, they said no. UAE, they also said no. I think these are the Muslim majority countries that should have voted yes. What about India? India abstained from voting. So this is again abstaining from voting. You see a lot of abstentions from India in this year. Firstly for the Russia 3 times and then China. So what is this showing in the world? The world may be thinking either it is India's weakness, or second, either it is India's own plan, or you can call it is India's own diplomacy. So whatever it is known by India itself, by the Ministry of External Affairs. But here it is a stand that India has not chosen to vote against, neither against nor in the favor. So this extremely close vote. So what was the vote? 17 members voted for the favor. The 19 members voted against this resolution. They feel that China is not violating human rights, and 11 abstained from voting. So you see there is a close, extremely close vote, 17 and 19. It highlights that growing number of states willing to take a stand on principle and shine a spotlight on China's sweeping rights violations. So even 17 votes are enough to show a spotlight on China's human rights violations. What can we expect in the future? So you see this resolution failed. It was not a success. So I think nothing can erase the stain of China's crime against humanity. This is by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, and this will continue. What India can do? So India should have voted yes, but what was its plan? No one knows. India should have voted yes, and if the world pressurized China, that then only it can work. So pressure politics will work here. Now coming to next page is the city page. This is also a city page. Then comes comment and politics page. So why this news has come? Because External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar is currently in New Zealand, and he talked to the New Zealand's Prime Minister. What he said is, India pressed Russia on safety of Ukraine nuclear plant. What is this Ukraine nuclear plant? It is called Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. It is Europe's biggest nuclear plant, and a catastrophe on this nuclear plant can erase human population by about 65%, which means 5 billion out of 7 billion can be dead if this nuclear plant catches fire. So what he discussed here is, in this situation, Jaishankar said he would see what India can do, which obviously would be in the India's interest, but also in the best interest of the world. So when it comes to nuclear catastrophe, every nation is a little bit scared. So this was discussed there. Nothing more. Then comes government and politics page. Here most of the news are political. This page has mostly news related to crime, and also here news is about some natural disaster, Uttarakhand avalanche. Here also you see most of the news are based on crime and religion. Then comes the word page. Today there was an attack on Thailand, a gunman attacked. So this is not that important. This is not going to come in the exam point of view, although it is important for the word. Russia missiles hit Ukrainian city near nuclear plant site. So this is an important news, that Russia and Ukraine are not stopping. They are currently fighting each other near the nuclear plant site. So Russia launched missiles that hit apartment buildings in the southern Ukrainian city of Zaporizhzhia, a local official said Thursday. So 3 people were killed, 12 wounded in the region, and this is Europe's biggest nuclear power plant, which Moscow illegally annexed. So currently what is the situation in this nuclear plant is that Russia annexed this nuclear plant, it took control of it, and the staff is Ukrainian, so a lot of imbalance in the working. Also IAEA, which is International Atomic Energy Agency, these experts from this agency came to this nuclear plant and they examined. Also they left some experts to examine that in the future as well, but you see currently that this battle is not ending. So the head of UN's Atomic Energy Watchdog is expected to visit Kyiv this week, so another visit. And why this visit? To discuss the situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant after Putin signed a decree Wednesday declaring that Russia was taking over 6 nuclear facilities. So there will be examination. So they will examine it. And what is the reaction of Ukraine? Ukraine's foreign ministry called the move a criminal act. And it said that Putin's decree is null and void. So you see both sides are not stopping this war against each other. And what is at stake? Human population, climate, environment is at stake. Until these two countries do not understand and political pressure do not comes in the way of this war, it is not going to solve. So next come the page of economy. You see, World Bank cuts fiscal year 23 growth forecast by 100 basis points to 6.5. We have discussed this earlier in this newspaper that there will be impact in the growth. So growth will be less than 7%, and you see the World Bank have cut the growth to 6.5%. Earlier it was 7.5%. So why exactly this forecast the World Bank has done? The World Bank on Thursday trimmed India's growth forecast for 2022-23 by 100 basis point, projecting that the Indian economy will grow at 6.5% compared to earlier estimate of 7.5%. What is the current situation? India's GDP grew at 8.7%. So next estimate is 6.7%. What is the reason? So reasons are many. For example, Russia-Ukraine war plus global monetary policy tightening. You see, Federal Reserve have increased its interest rate, so that is why there is effect on Indian economy. So this global tightening, monetary policy tightening, will continue to weigh on India's economic outlook. Also, elevated inflation on the back of higher prices of key commodities, for example food, fuel. These are the key commodities that people use every single day. So this elevation is causing economic you can call growth, slowdown in the growth. Also, rising borrowing costs will affect domestic demand. So interest rate have increased, Federal Reserve have increased the interest rate, so borrowing cost has increased. This can affect domestic demand, particularly private consumption in the fiscal year 2023-24, while slowing global growth will inhibit growth in the demand for India's export. So there is in fact a global recession. Bank of England, UK's bank, have called on that UK is in recession this year. So what will be the impact? India's export will increase because UK's products are more costly than India's. So that is why more countries will tend to buy Indian products. So this can benefit India in some way or the other. Notably, the Reserve Bank of India also last week cut its growth forecast to 7%. So this is also by RBI. It has cut its forecast to 7% from earlier estimates of 7.2%. Also, it has raised the benchmark repo rate by 50 basis point again to 5.9% as it attempts to contain high inflation.